Hi there, welcome to the WordPress Guinea Pig podcast, where I share actionable, usable advice about WordPress and anything that you might use it for. So if you want to learn how to bend and twist WordPress for your projects, you're in the right place. In this episode, I'm talking about WordPress versus HTML. Is WordPress better than HTML? Hi there, site owner. Comparing WordPress to HTML is not truly a valid comparison, as those aren't the same kind of technologies. So I'm going to do a deep dive in comparing WordPress to static HTML sites, which is what I think you're probably really here for. So is WordPress better than static HTML? It could be. It depends on your needs. Generally, WordPress will give you some more flexibility if you're a non-coder, while static HTML will give you better performance and probably better security too. So before you buy your domain name and take to social media to ask which web hosting and to use in hopes of maybe making your decision between WordPress and static HTML easier, let's get into this and see if I can help you make that decision. So I have been asked, is WordPress better than HTML? And I say it that way because I know that my developer friends out there are thinking like, what? Those aren't even the same, like apples and oranges. WordPress is a CMS, or a content management system. HTML is the markup language that powers the web. WordPress produces HTML that when a reader visits the site, that's what they see. That's what they get. That's what their browser gets to render your page. So while WordPress versus HTML is not a great comparison, there's a little bit more to the story, isn't there? Maybe the question should be, is WordPress better than a static HTML site? That is something that can be compared. But the rabbit hole keeps getting deeper thanks to modern technologies that are introducing the ability to use WordPress to create static HTML sites. Do you get the best of both worlds? Like the ability to edit and control your site using WordPress, but the security and performance benefits of a static HTML site? Maybe, maybe not. As with many things in life, the answer is, it depends. Now, before we dive into this topic more, let's make sure that we are all on the same page as far as understanding what WordPress and HTML are. What is WordPress? Well, as I briefly mentioned, it's an open source content management system. That means it's a software you log into and create content through a nice, clean user interface. It provides a modular framework to add and remove functionality so that you can make WordPress do many things such as e-commerce, photo galleries, create online courses, blogging, and more. WordPress is a tool to abstract away the complexities of creating a website while also bringing you plenty of capabilities all into one package. In other words, it's a tool that tries to make creating websites easy. In some regards, it succeeds. In others, well, maybe not so much, probably depending on who you ask. The output of WordPress is dynamic. This is important. This means that the output is different based on a variety of factors when the visitor lands on the page. One simple example might be when a page loads, it might load differently based if the user is logged in or not. Just for an example. Let's go over some pros and cons of WordPress. The pros first. First, I think the most important pro for WordPress is the ability to get started very quickly and produce a quality product, and then have the flexibility to grow it into something amazing. Now, this means it's both easy and hard, so it might actually be on the cons list too. It's easy to get started with WordPress. It's harder to create advanced sites, and it's very difficult to ultimately master it. But, any good product should really work that way, right? Number two, it gives you the full range of control over your site. What I mean about this is that WordPress lets you shoot yourself in the foot, which sounds bad, but it honestly is a good thing. It means that you're not limited too much and can ultimately end up with exactly what you want. And many platforms and tools are what I call opinionated. This means that you get what they give you and your creativity is kind of stuck inside their box. This is not true with WordPress. Third pro is it's easy access to additional possibilities, which sometimes leads to interesting discoveries. Now, WordPress has a theme library and a plugin library that you can peruse just right there inside the admin dashboard, meaning that you can discover new capabilities that you can add to your site without the need to code them yourself. And in addition, the developers are constantly working to improve their plugins, which means that you gain the benefits of their labor. And the final pro is by giving you easy control, you don't have to hire a web developer to create your site, saving you money. Here's a quote that was put together I found it on HubSpot. And it says, according to a custom quote by WebFX, hiring a developer to build out a responsive site with maybe 1 to 10 that are moderately styled would cost anywhere between $7,000 and $10,000. Now, it seems a little high to me. You could probably get it cheaper. But the point is hiring a developer can be kind of costly sometimes, especially if it's an important project. So some cons. Yes, WordPress does have some cons. The most common complaint I hear about WordPress is that while it is simple to start, it's not easy enough to move up towards advanced websites. There's a lot of questions that can come up in newcomers' minds to WordPress. So while it's a con, I do also believe that this kind of thing is often on the site owner. Mastering web skills isn't some kind of instantaneous endeavor, right? You do need to put in the work and not expect WordPress to just magically bring your imagination to life. And that would be amazing if it could. But my point is just, yes, it's a con, but also you really should just work at it. Eventually you'll get it and you'll burst through that barrier. The second con is WordPress is based on PHP and MySQL. And now, while these technologies are great, the fact is it is a developed software package. That means you have to worry about potential security risks. Now, WordPress is generally safe, and most good hosts will do at least a proper baseline of security. So I don't want to scare you away from using it. When a third of the web uses it, it's a solid product. But keep in mind that each plugin that you add is developed by someone, and if you're running an important business site, you probably should do your due diligence and verify plugins before using them. Okay, what is static HTML? HTML is the markup language a web developer uses to build websites, like the old-fashioned way, kind of, without a website builder. When you hear static HTML in the context of WordPress, it usually means either something like a caching system or possibly a static site generator, or in other words, static HTML files that are created from the output of WordPress. Some static HTML pros, it's fast, really, really fast, but usually. And I say usually because, you could build static HTML pages that have a ton of resources like style sheets and scripts that will affect the performance. The primary reason that a static HTML page is faster than a dynamic page is because when a dynamic page is created, it has to communicate with a database and combine some templates, run some rules, and then kind of output the results. Whereas a static HTML page does not. It simply is the output right from the start, and it's just pulled from the file system. The second con is that the second pro, you get full control of the output. While technically with WordPress, you can't control the output as well, static HTML is completely under your control. You're coding it. This means that you can make it exactly as lean as you want for performance, or maybe as beautiful as you want for great landing page optimization, but you're coding it yourself, or you're paying a developer, and therefore you have full control. The final pro is you could use this a static website on a very low-priced web hosting, since there's no need for a database or underlying code interpreter like for PHP or C# or something like that. You don't need a very robust host. The most basic web hosting that simply serves HTML files is all you need. You should be able to find static HTML hosts for much less than what you might have for like managed WordPress hosting. Okay, static HTML cons now, finally. If you aren't a web developer, you might have to hire one to create a static website or static HTML site, and either to create the source code directly or to set up your WordPress to generate that static HTML. Neither is necessarily easy for non-coders or non-techies. So manually coding your website in HTML or setting up the system that will generate the static HTML. The other con is it's static. So while static has benefit for speed and it is a con for maintenance, you do have to manually update the files unless you have the static site generator. That could alleviate this con altogether, but that kind of leads into the next con. It's limitations in functionality. Since there's nothing dynamic about it, there are some limits. With static HTML sites, you really only create sort of articles, like they're read-only articles that your visitor is going to see. It doesn't really react to the visitor based on the factors like being logged in and things like that a WordPress website can bring you. Is WordPress better than HTML? And I know you're really going to hate this answer, maybe, or it depends. There are scenarios where WordPress is the better choice and others where maybe static HTML is better. Let me see if I can help make this decision easier for you. Use WordPress if you have users who will need to log in, like maybe you have a membership site where the content is locked down behind paywalls. If you want to operate an e-commerce business, or you would like an interface that you can just log into and create and edit your articles. Or if you don't have any web development skills and you don't really want to spend the money to hire a developer either. You'd use static HTML if you run a simple site publishing informative articles for your visitors with no real interaction required, like commenting and forms and things like that. If you need the ultimate security, a static HTML site has no database or code to hack. If you have some web dev chops, or maybe you want to show off some skills, static HTML site can be cool. And if you want the cheapest possible hosting that you can find. A note about WordPress static site generators. Now, I'm not going to go too in-depth here. That would be for a whole nother episode. But there are some services that will attempt to create static HTML sites from your WordPress. The idea is to give you a familiar way to work on your content, WordPress. And then when you hit publish, the output is actually rendered into a static HTML. That means that you interact with WordPress to do the adding and updating of your files, of your articles, and your readers never actually touch WordPress. When they come into your site, they're loading the static HTML files directly. Now, this kind of attempts to give you the best of both worlds, where you can edit and manage the content, on the WordPress side, and you have the performance and security benefits of the static HTML for the readers. There are some tools that kind of have their limits, and you got to be careful when you're using them if you have a really simple site that's not doing anything complex, sure, you can try these out. You could end up with an insanely fast website that is exceptionally secure too. These two services, Shifter or WP to Static, could be something that you might find helpful. So what do I use here on WordPress Guinea Pig? Well, I use WordPress. It'd be a little bit weird if I didn't, huh? But it is a heavily customized version of WordPress. I shouldn't say version of WordPress. It's the same version everyone's using, but as a web developer, I have the luxury of doing this myself, so I do have a very heavily customized theme and personal plugins that I've written myself for my site. I will be documenting some of that in something I'm calling, build the fastest WordPress website possible, working title. But I will be producing something where I teach you how to create an exceptionally fast website in WordPress as well. So in summary, in this episode, I explained what WordPress is and how it compares to HTML, or really static HTML sites. I hope I was able to clarify these two distinct methods of creating websites in the modern era. WordPress wins the flexibility crown, I think, where static HTML kind of takes the performance and security wins. It really is up to the needs of your project and which that you choose. Thank you for joining me for this episode of the WordPress Guinea Pig podcast. If you're listening from your favorite podcast player, please subscribe so you don't miss an episode. If you're listening from YouTube, please subscribe and ring that bell so that you can be notified every time I publish a new episode. And if you enjoyed this episode, please like and share this video. I'd greatly appreciate it. And this seemingly simple act really does help a lot. See you soon in the next episode when I discuss another cool thing about WordPress. Take care.